current account deficit for Q2 has narrowed to 1% of the GDP. In fact, it has moderated on the back of trade deficit, a stronger inflows that have come in from services sector, higher remittances that have come in from people living outside of India and bringing and pumping money to India. All of that has helped in narrowing CAD to 1% of the GDP in Q2 FY24.
Yeah, you mentioned services sector that has led to this increase or narrowing of the gap between. So based on the latest figures, $28.7 billion services exports happened from August 2023, from August 2022 to August 2023, and it was up 8.4%. What is still something that we need to look at? 87% of India's crude needs are met by imports, which accounts for 20% of the import bill. 10% of additionally is vegetable oils. And electronics, even though they have seen a big jump in exports, 10% of the import bill is electronics and electronics equipment imports. So those need to change, and probably we'll see a surplus if the way things are going.
All right. And why is it a good news? I mean, come to think of it, if you compare it to corresponding period last year, which is Q2 of financial year 23, it was at about 3.8%. So from 3.8%, it has come down to 1%. So that's substantial. But if you look at both import and export, it's a very interesting story that unfolds. So a narrowing current account deficit on the back of the merchandise trade exports, which are also slowing, while imports also continue to slow. So it's not like India is either importing substantially or exporting substantially. Both have been tepid in the last quarter gone by. But all of that could change in this current quarter, because if you look at the data that is coming in, volatility in crude basket, crude which accounts for, as you mentioned, 20% of India's import bill is going to lead to a higher import bill, and perhaps the narrowing trade deficit could further widen in the quarter to come.
But on the looking at it from the optimistic side, probably if the way electronics exports are happening, if that continues to increase the way they have been increasing, they have gone up 24%. If they continue to increase, that 10% of import bill in electronics may come down.
Okay.
And if services continue to lead the way they are, probably maybe not next year, but in the coming years, we may be looking at an export surplus, considering geopolitical situation does not worsen in the times to come.
All right, geopolitical, a lot will, of course, a lot will depend on geopolitical situation, but I'm also going to look at the FDI in quarter 2 of financial year 23, not looking very good. For the very first time, there's been an FDI outflow as opposed to FDI inflow, and those numbers are in fact also quite staggering. So essentially, there's been a big net decline in net FDI, and the portfolio inflows, even as the external commercial borrowing continues to increase. So that FDI outflow to the tune of $0.3 billion against inflow of $5 billion in financial year 24, the Q1 of financial year 24, and $6.2 billion in Q2 FY23. So as compared to the inflows of $6.2 billion in Q2, there has been an outflow. Money has gone out of India's shore. FDI picture not looking very great.
FDI began to pick up only towards the end of this year. And if the news, people are expecting optimistically that Fed rates are going to come down, not even stay stagnant, then we can expect a U-turn in the FDIs.
All right. So FDIs and FPIs.
In the times to come.
Absolutely. And if you look at the net FPI inflows, in fact, for the Q2 of financial year 24 at $4.95 billion as opposed to $15.73 billion in Q1 of FY24. So in fact, FPI, both FPI and FDI has taken a beating in Q2. But as far as current account deficit is concerned, narrowing to 1% of the GDP. Now that is good news. That is good news on the back of the fact that India continues to narrow its deficit, has come on the back of merchandise trade deficit, which is narrowing as both imports and exports continue to narrow.